today's video, I just really want to quickly talk about whether it's going to be a good idea for you to pull for Jingyuan, who is going to come out in the second half of 1.0 right after Seely's banner ends in 4 days. And in today's video, I'm going to quickly go over his kit and also bring in 2 examples of very strong characters that are going to be coming in after 1.0, one of them coming in 1.1 and one of them presumably coming after 1.1. And these 2 characters are going to be Silver Wolf and Kafka. Both of these characters I think are just as strong as Jingyuan, although they might have sort of like a different role in terms of what they play in the game. I still do feel like that comparing these 3 characters are a good idea because of how, well, first of all 3 characters are going to be 5-star characters, and personally speaking, I think everyone should stay free to play in Star Rail because of how, I mean, if you spend money on this game to get characters that you like, that's fine, but if you're spending money on this game solely because of how you want to clear content faster, I won't recommend you doing that because of how, to a certain extent, I think after spending a certain amount of money, the game is just going to be, well, sort of like an auto clicker, if that makes sense. If you want to ensure that the game is going to stay fun for you for a long time, I won't recommend you to spend money on this game. We're going to get even more free Stellar Jades, although at the moment we might sort of have a drought of Stellar Jades in terms of how after you get like your free 300 or 400 pulls, you're just going to run out of ways to get even more Stellar Jade. And it is the same for me. I've been saving up a lot of Stellar Jade personally. I think I'm at like 13k right now. I'm just sort of like saving it and making sure that I'm going to spend it wisely. And so that's one reason why I think we should consider whether we should pull for Jingyuan or not. He is a strong character and I'm just going to go through that really quickly. So first of all, we can see Jingyuan is a 5-star lightning erudition path character, which means that he's going to be an AoE DPS who is coincidentally the same sort of character as Serval, if that makes sense, because of how they're both erudition and also lightning character. However, we need to keep one thing in mind, is that I think everyone got a Serval for free, and already I think we see a reason why we shouldn't be pulling for Jingyuan. Although he is such a strong character who I think is going to be very useful in the later stages of maybe Simulated Universe, and also at the moment I think there's only 15 stages to Forgotten Halls and also only 6 worlds in Simulated Universe, but I'm sure that Hoverse will add more worlds and stages once the game progresses even more. So first of all, let's talk about his basic and also his skill and ultimate. As you can see, his basic is quite standard, deals 50% of his attack to a single enemy. By the way, these stats are at level 1, so that's why the multipliers might be a little bit low. And for his skill, he deals lightning damage to all enemies and increases the lightning lord's attack count by 2 for the next turn. I'm going to go over what this lightning lord thing is later. And lastly, we have his ultimate, which just deals a large amount of lightning damage and increases the attack of the lightning lord by 3 for the next turn. We can see how the point that I was just making, how Serval is a very similar character to him, that is sort of reflected here because of how his kit, his skill in particular, and also his ultimate are basically the same sort of thing as Serval. And I'm just going to quickly explain what his lightning lord is. So essentially, his lightning lord is sort of like a summon. Well, if I use Genshin terms to explain this, I think you guys will understand this a bit better. Jingyuan's skill is sort of like Xiangling's skill in Genshin Impact, where Xiangling summons Guoba, and here, Lightning Lord is sort of the same idea. It's summoned at the start of the battle, the Lightning Lord has its own base attack and it also attacks on its own, but then its attacks are considered followed attacks, as you can see, and essentially its attack count is the amount of times that it can attack, and every single time the Lightning Lord attacks, it consumes 1 attack count, which is why it's going to be crucial for you to use Jingyuan's skill and also his ultimate to make sure that Lightning Lord constantly has attack count so that you don't miss out on Lightning Lord attacking your enemies. One nice thing that I think I really need to mention is how it deals lightning damage that is equal to Jingyuan's attack to one enemy, and an adjacent enemy also receives 25% of the damage dealt to the main target. Essentially, this means that you're getting a free extra attack from Jingyuan, and also because of how it deals lightning damage, I'm assuming that it can also break enemies' toughness bars. It has a maximum attack count of 10, which means that although you don't want the attack count to be always at 10 at its maximum, you still want to make sure that there's enough so that you don't have to worry about it all the time in terms of making sure that it has enough attack count so that your rotation can be smooth. Another bonus about this is how every single time its attack count is increased by 1, its speed also gets increased by 10, which means that, for example, if Jingyuan deals his ultimate, that increases the Lightning Lord's attack count by 3. Increasing it by 3 means that its speed also gets increased by 30, and giving the Lightning Lord an extra 30 speed is actually quite crucial because of how being able to make the most out of the Lightning Lord is going to be what makes your Jingyuan very strong. Moving on to the final part of his kit, his technique. Essentially, by using his technique, you increase the Lightning Lord's attack count by 2 in the first turn, and only for the first turn, I'm assuming, because of how it's described here. Using Jingyuan's technique sort of just makes your rotation a bit faster because of how the Lightning Lord will be able to attack a tiny bit faster because of how 1 attack count equals to 10 extra speed. So yeah, I think this is going to be an essential part of Jingyuan's kit as well. Being able to give your Jingyuan a slight slap boost is going to be very important. And now let's move on to the second character, Silverwolf. So she's a Quantum Nihility Path character who focuses on debuffing the enemies, and I have to say her kit is so broken. So first of all, let me just show you what her kit looks like. So these are her normal attack, skill, and ultimate. First of all, her normal attack. It deals a single instance of quantum damage to one enemy, and it also has a 65% base chance of implanting a random bug into the enemy that lasts for 3 turns. Essentially, this is like a debuff that is applied onto enemies, and it is also her talent, so I'll talk about that in a bit after I've gone over her skill and also her ultimate. Moving on to Silverwolf's skill, this is what makes her a broken character in my opinion. Of course, everything that you see right now are subject to change, and so who knows, maybe Hoververse will nerf her. Anyway, let's just have a read, and I think after that we'll get an idea of how broken she is and how game changing she is. Very standard of a skill. It deals quantum damage to enemies, and there's also a 75, 88 or 90% base chance to add 1 weakness of the same type as a random ally's attack type on the enemy, which will last for 3 turns, and it will also reduce the enemy's damage resistance to that attack type by 20%, and also there's a 100% base chance to reduce the damage resistance of that enemy by 12, 17.2 or 18% for 3 turns. These percentages here correspond to what the skill looks like at level 1, 13 and 15, and just by reading it, I can tell you this skill is going to be absolutely broken. Imagine you're fighting an enemy that doesn't have a quantum weakness, and you have Seelie on the same team as Silverwolf. Silverwolf uses her skill, adds quantum weakness on an enemy, reduces the enemy's damage resistance to quantum by 20, meaning that your Seelie is going to be able to break down that enemy's toughness bar now and also deal increased damage to that enemy. Just think about how broken that is. But then you also have her ultimate. First of all, you deal a lot of quantum damage to one single enemy. As you can see here, the multipliers are actually quite great. And then you're also going to be reducing the target's defense by these percentages here, depending on the level of the trace. Before I just sum up how broken Silverwolf seems, let's talk about the technique and explain what the bug thing is. There's a total of 3 types of bugs that you can implant on enemies. You can either reduce the target enemy's attack, or you can reduce their defense, or you can also reduce their speed. And every single time she attacks, regardless of it being a normal attack, skill, or an ultimate, she also has a certain percentage base chance to implant a random bug that lasts 2 turns on the enemy target. I'm not sure whether the turns stack up, but I hope it doesn't, because if it does, it's going to be absolutely broken. Imagine an enemy with reduced defense for 5 turns in total because of how the bug that her normal attack implants lasts 3 turns and how here it lasts for 2 turns. Either way, if it doesn't stack up, it's still fine. The amount of debuffs that you're applying onto your enemy is already enough, and imagine if your Silverwolf can use her skill and then use her ultimate, just, you know, the whole shebang of her kit, and then next turn she normal attacks and applies even more bugs. One thing that I'm not too sure is whether these bugs will overwrite each other. Like, for example, would you be getting rid of the defense reduction by implanting a bug that reduces attack? I'm not too sure. I hope that it stacks, but at the same time I feel like if it does stack, it's going to be a bit broken. Let's just visualize this for a bit. Imagine if the enemy has 18.75% reduced attack, 18.75% reduced defense, and also 12.5% reduced speed. That alone is already ridiculous. That's me excluding all the other debuffs that you get from Silverwolf's skill and also her ultimate. Her technique is also a tiny bit broken in my opinion. It ignores the weakness types and just straight up reduces the toughness bar right at the beginning of the battle. For all enemies this is. Essentially, I think this is the final icing on top of the cake because of how before even starting the battle, you're already gaining such an advantage. Now that I've talked about the entirety of Silverwolf's kit, I hope you guys can see why pulling for Jingyuan might not be the smartest idea, since she's coming in 1.1. There's a lot of reliable leaks out there nowadays, and I'm sure that all of them predict that Silverwolf is going to come out in 1.1. Be it first half or second half, I think Silverwolf is going to be one of those must-pull characters if you want to have just an amazing time in Star Rail after 1.1 comes out. I've just got this feeling that maybe Silverwolf will be sort of like the Bennett of Star Rail, you get what I mean? Bennett in Genshin Genshin works with every single character if you don't C6 him, that is, but at the same time, even if you do C6 him, he's still arguably the strongest support character in Genshin, and I think it's going to be the same case for Silverwolf. She's most likely going to be the best nihility character in the game for a very long time, and personally, if you ask me, so this is my opinion, I'd be choosing Silverwolf over Jingyuan any day of the week, 24/7. Right now, I think my server is strong enough, and I just don't see why I need to pull for another Erudition Path Lightning character that essentially is a better version of Servo. I get it, but still, I would want to spend my fellow Jade wisely and spend them on characters that I really like. Moving on to the next character that I want to really just talk about because of how I think she's also coming in a few updates. We have Kafka here, who is a Nihility Path Lightning 5-star character who is sort of different from your standard Nihility Path characters, if that makes sense. Let's just talk about her kit first of all, and from there we'll talk about her utility in the game. Her normal attack is pretty standard, deals lightning damage to a single enemy. So here we can see a difference between Jingyuan and Kafka. One's AoE and one's single target. But then, if we look at her skill, it deals a large amount of lightning damage to one character, and then it also deals a smaller multiplier of damage to the enemy adjacent to the one that you're targeting. And if all the enemies that are being hit, including the one that's adjacent to the main enemy, all the DOTs are going to happen immediately with this multiplier applied to it, but I think at the same time DOT itself will also happen when it is supposed to happen. So essentially you get two instances of DOT. And then we have Kafka's ultimate, which is the reason why I think you guys are watching the Kafka part of today's video. First of all, let me just ignore all the numbers here and just talk about how amazing she looks during her ultimate, and that little boom animation at the end. Oh my days, the animation alone is insane, but the numbers also are insane. She deals a tiny bit of lightning damage to all enemies on the field, so this is the AoE part of her kit, and then every single enemy that's hit has a 100% base chance of becoming shocked, and it immediately deals the shock DOT damage by this multiplier here, and the shock will last for 2 turns. But then after the ultimate ends, when the enemies are still shocked, they'll receive lightning DOT damage equivalent to this multiplier of Kafka's attack at the beginning of each turn. Hear me out, okay? If you pair another lightning character that can apply shock onto enemies, this last part of Kafka's ultimate stays, and it's going to be consistently doing this damage to enemies. Let's just imagine this, Kafka being paired up with Servo. Servo uses her ultimate to break enemies' toughness bar, applying the shocked effect on not all but maybe some enemies. Then when Kafka gets her ultimate, this thing is going to just go insane. Like, I'm just telling you guys, if Kafka is paired up with Servo, the amount of lightning DOT damage that you guys are going to see, that's going to be absolutely insane. Just think about how many turns the enemies are going to get shocked for, and just think about the amount of damage that you're going to get from this. Next up, we have Kafka's talent, which is essentially the follow-up attack part of her kit. Whenever another character on your team deals basic attack damage to an enemy, Kafka launches a follow-up attack, dealing lightning damage equal to this multiplier here to that enemy, and there's also a 100% base chance of increasing the DOT damage inflicted by this multiplier here for 2 turns. However, one downside is that this effect can only be triggered 1 time per turn, meaning that you're not going to get infinite amount of follow-up attacks by Kafka. But I think it's also safe to say that being able to inflict the DOT damage by this multiplier here for 2 turns, for another 2 turns that is, that alone is really insane. Let's say you have Sealy, Kafka, and also Servo on the team. Let's just leave the 4th character aside for now. Sealy might be, normal attacking because of how you have used up all your skill points, or maybe because of how you want to save up the skill points so that Kafka can use her skill. Sealy normal attacks, and then Kafka does this follow-up attack, increasing her own damage because of how when it is Kafka's turn, she can apply shock onto enemies if she has her ultimate, or maybe Servo can use her skill, having a certain chance to apply shock onto the enemy as well. This little thing here I think is the finishing touch to Kafka's kit, but then there's also one thing that I still haven't mentioned, her technique. Now looking at this, essentially if you use this at the beginning of the battle, the enemy is already going to be affected by shock damage, and they're also going to be shocked for 3 turns. This means that if your rotation is perfect, your enemies are going to be shocked forever if you have another lightning character paired up with Kafka like Servo. The whole kit of Kafka emphasizes on dealing lightning DOT damage, and there's also another few things that make Kafka very, very strong. For example, her follow-up attack, and also how she can make enemies take the DOT damage at the beginning of the turn, while also still taking the original DOT damage whenever it is supposed to be inflicted. Kafka doesn't feel like your traditional Nihility Path character which applies debuff onto enemies. Instead, to me at least, I think that she's going to fill up that sub DPS spot in your team because of how she doesn't really need to have a lot of crit damage or crit rate, since a large portion of her damage is from lightning DOT damage, which doesn't crit, and at the same time the scaling isn't that bad. And if you have another support character, maybe a Harmony Path character like Bronya or maybe Jingyuan, Kafka is going to be absolutely insane. And so I definitely recommend people pulling for Kafka when she's coming out. And to end off today's video, I'm just going to quickly tell you guys what my conclusion is. Whether it is a good idea to pull for Jingyuan ultimately depends on you, but at the same time, I just really want to highlight the fact that there are other amazing characters that are coming out in the game. And so while Jingyuan is going to be very beneficial, certain characters are going to outshine these erudition path characters. For example, Sealy. Jingyuan is a very strong character with very strong multipliers, and he practically works with every single harmony nihility path characters in the game, maybe except for Asta because of how her ultimate boosts speed, and I don't think that's a stat that Jingyuan needs very much of. Either way, I hope that today's video has given you a better idea regarding whether you should pull for Jingyuan or not. But if you do want him because of how you like his character very much, pull for him by all means. If you liked today's video, please like and subscribe because it really means a lot to me, and we're halfway there with our goal, 1000 subscribers. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!